Good evening, everyone. Are we on, Madam
Yes,
Clerk?
Madam
Okay.
Mayor, it's 5:02 and we are live.
Okay, great, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special city commission meeting regarding the L&M properties downtown issue. Good evening, everyone. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Rush,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here. Commissioner
Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Okay, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Malik. Thank you very much. Before we get started on this, I want to, something came up and it's time sensitive and it's quite urgent for our students. I got a call from school board member Erica Whitfield, who's our school board member. You know, the whole redistricting of the high schools.
Right.
Well, apparently the current proposal is to take every one of our Lake Worth students from 12th Avenue South, who currently go to Lake Worth Community High School, and send them to Boynton Beach High School. No. That's exactly why I'm bringing it up. I would like, and I've spoken with Erica and I told her that I would do my best tonight to, bring it up, and I appreciate your, indulgence in this, but I would like to have authority either to write a letter or to do a resolution and the other thing is the public hearing for this very issue is Thursday night when I'll be giving my brilliant State of the City address. So none of us can be there. So I would like, consensus to either write them a strong letter or do a resolution in opposition of that. We have to save our kids from getting, it's 12th Avenue South and South. So it's like we're busing our kids out of town. It's not a good idea. So do I have consensus to go
Madam Mayor,
forward?
can I just,
Sure.
what if can we get the educational task force to maybe be present on behalf of our city?
Well, that, I don't know.
Well, I don't know the timing of, if the meeting's Thursday night, no,
Right. The meeting is Thursday night.
there's no time to organize anything like
Yeah.
that.
So I think, and she also said coming through the commission would be, if the educational task force folks can be emailed about it to
Yeah.
perhaps on their own go, that would be
Or
perfect.
email the school board or
Well.
on behalf of,
Right.
same, but the more people, yes, the better.
Right. I would ask citizens to write to the school board in opposition of this. This is a very important thing for our kids. We pride ourselves on being a community high school. Our kids start in our we have all the grammar schools, then we have Lake Worth Middle School, and then they start playing band instruments and playing sports in Lake Worth. So I would ask any citizen that has an interest in this to send an email to the school board, and it's, I have the email address is boardoffice@palmbeachschools.org, boardoffice@palmbeachschools.org. And for those of you tuning in from home, I would ask you to do the same thing. We need to show a show of force for our children, that our community children stay right here in our own school. So do I have Mr. McCoy?
No, I was just gonna say, yes, by all means, consensus, if you want to draft something and send it around.
Well, we don't have time. I'll write a letter, and I'm pretty good at writing letters. We oppose this action. This is a community school, and otherwise, my day is full tomorrow. I just want to get something out before it gets too late. So
Okay, fine, consensus for me.
consensus from everybody?
Yeah.
Yep. Sarah? Okay, great. So tomorrow, hopefully we'll be able to, city manager will be able to get together and get a letter. I think a strong letter rather than a resolution would be probably as effective. Thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence.
Letting us know.
She's very freaked out about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, as was I when I first
Yeah.
heard about it. So the reason we've gathered you all here tonight, as you know, is the L&M project, which is the downtown project. The way we're going to handle this meeting is the Dana, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, is going to give their presentation. We're not going to have questions. We're just going to let him go. And after that happens, we'll take public, we'll discuss it. We'll take public comment. So I'd like to have Dana have the opportunity to just give a presentation uninterrupted and save save our questions, save your questions for the end. So take it away. If you could just introduce yourself and what the treasurer is.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Dana Little, Urban Design Director for Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. And I'm here with Tom Lanahan, our Executive Director of Treasure Coast. And we'll be joined in a few moments, who's en route from Fort Lauderdale, Tim Hernandez, the developer who was on our team during the charrette, who did the financial pro formas for us throughout this effort. And it's good to see a lot of friendly faces. It's been a while since we had our charrette last spring, early last summer. We've been hard at work since then. As you know, we've presented a couple of times before this board, our work in progress, and I think we made another presentation. And for the sake of the folks that are here listening, we submitted our final draft, our draft final report in December, and then met with each of the commissioners and the mayor through December and into January, trying to go through all the variations and iterations and the details of this project and this report. This has been at once very fulfilling, but very challenging. There's a lot of different options that we explored, not only physically in terms of what fits on these properties based upon the public input that we received through the charrette process, but also what works financially. It was very important to test the different concepts and ideas that we heard from the public against market influences and, working with a real developer who builds these type of things to say, well, this can actually be done, but we need to adjust A, B, and C. So as I've presented this a number of times tonight, I'm going to try to go relatively quickly so that we've got a lot of time for questions and answers, or hopefully answers, but also focus on some of the financial aspects and what the core recommendations are of the plan after all this effort. All of you, I think, know at this point that this is a multi-agency effort, not only with Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, we're a public planning agency, and we only work for local governments, but of course, the city of Lake Worth Beach and the Lake Worth Beach CRA. So there has been a three-way partnership in this. There's a lot of history behind these L&M parcels and an RFP a few years ago. But the idea was to try to hit the reset button and see what are appropriate, understanding the limitations to the properties, what are the appropriate approaches for redevelopment. Just quickly, this is the detailed study area right there, right in downtown. And our core objective was to, through a public planning process, create alternate redevelopment strategies for those properties between L&M was the focus, but then also what are some of the adjacent influencing parcels, be it the K Street parking lot and K and First Avenue South. So we explored a lot of these different ideas. We kicked off our public workshop, which was our 5-day charrette process on April 20th. You'll recall it was at 111 or 1121 Hatch, the CRA offices just down the street. That Saturday, April 30th, we had great turnout. We had nearly 60 people that participated and actually stayed throughout the day. It's hard enough to get folks to show up on a Saturday morning, but then to stay for 4 or 5 hours doing planning for downtown, it shows, number one, well, primarily how much the community, adores this place and wanted to participate and get it right. We had, as I said, great turnout that Saturday. And then many of you actually came and visited us throughout the week. You came to look at the plans that you presented here on that Saturday as each of the tables developed different concepts and ideas. And we developed a punch list at that point, that Saturday, of key things for us as a team to look at throughout the course of the week during the charrette. I won't read all these, but some of the highlights, we heard no monolithic block-sized buildings. That's, I think, in direct response to what the selected RFP response was the year and a half beforehand. Utilize accessory dwelling units, try to establish gentle density. And what does that mean? That means density that is almost transparent or is easily incorporated into context and fabric of the community. Like many cities, I don't think that Lake Worth Beach is afraid of higher density so much. It's the scale and the increment and the compatibility with the historic context, which is so important. We heard from many keep all of the historic structures that are on the sites. And we heard from many keep some of the historic structures on the sites. And we heard from a few, we don't, let's plan around them or plan without them. So there was not 100% consensus on that. So we did our best as a team to explore different options there. Small scale, historically sensitive architecture was important. Look for shared parking or offsite parking opportunities. What happens is that when you start to try to recruit or get investment and redevelopment in an area, providing on-site parking solely can actually make your project grow and become more and more expensive. So let's think about parking creatively as much as possible. And reconsider the height and density bonuses program in downtown. We heard throughout the course of the Charrette Week, we're not really sure like how to predict what redevelopment in this historic, by the way, the areas that we're working in are the historic Old Town Historic District, a limited area within downtown. And so we kind of took our cues from the public about that and thought that some of our recommendations might be just specific to that area. It could grow over time, some of the recommendations, but one of them is that, reconsider the density height bonus programs that currently exist within that downtown boundary, because a lot of folks felt that, well, it works well in other places. This is such a sensitive area and vulnerable area of downtown. It needs to be more predictable, what the ultimate outcome would be. Consider micro units, lots of progressive ideas. But I think if I had to sum it all up, maintain the historic scale and character to the extent possible. Now, I won't go into all the detail, but those of you that have participated or have participated through the process know that, some of the parcels were bought by the city and then conveyed to the CRA. Some were bought by the city over time, by the CRA over time. Some of the parcels that were purchased with penny sales tax have certain stipulations or requirements that go along with what their ultimate use is. So we're trying to triangulate through this maze of expectations, not to mention the expectations of the community, to come up with what we hope are reasonable solutions. So here we are. We not only do we have the workshop on Saturday, but then we transformed Hatch 1121 into the design studio. And as I said, many of you stopped by at least a couple of times throughout the course of the week just to look over our shoulder, but give us more ideas. And in fact, we had 15 to 20 folks per day. So as I said, we submitted our draft report in December of last year, a month ago now. And we've gotten input and edits from the city and from the CRA. And as I mentioned, we have had the opportunity to meet with the mayor and commissioners individually and gotten their input. And I'll try to address some of the comments and concerns that we heard through those meetings as I go through the presentation. I'm not going to read this to you. The report goes through an introduction. It goes through the whole process. It chronicles not only in narrative, but in graphic and photograph form, what we all went through together last year through this process, the history of the project as well. How did we get to this point? This area, this map or this plan identifies the three key areas that we focused on. Number one, the sort of Z-shaped parcels to the right, that is to the east, with Lake Avenue running east-west immediately north. That site one is those are the parcels that were agglomerated and were subject to the RFP that went out a couple of years earlier. Site number two, all the way to the left, that is the municipal parking lot at K Street. Immediately south of that are four older considered contributing structures. And then the site number three, immediately east of K Street, is a vacant parcel that's owned by the CRA currently. All of the parcels within site one are owned by the CRA, except for the chamber piece, I believe. And so we tried to, and all of what you see here are existing buildings I can't point to this, but all of the buildings that you see within the yellow areas are the existing structures that are there. So for instance, the buildings that are right there adjacent to where the number 1 is, that's the beautifully renovated historic structures that are currently the Leisure Services Department of the city. The structures to the south, near First Avenue South, those 4 parcels there, those are the historic structures that have been boarded up now for quite some time. And then same goes for the building south of the municipal lot at number 2 there. So we looked at a variety of different ways. How do we take the community concerns that we had about reinvestment in the area, but doing it at a scale that is consistent with the historic fabric, but also yields a return on investment because there has to be that for the city and the CRA. I'm not going to go painstakingly through all of these, but you'll just see that we came up with 3 different scenarios for site 1 to the left. We came up with 4 different scenarios for site 2 or the K Street. That's where the municipal parking lot is today. Initially, we looked at ways to replace the existing structures that are there now that are boarded up with either townhouses or maybe multifamily or affordable housing. We've also included in the latest iteration of the report some of the work that was done by the consulting firm WGI, where they looked at the expansion of the parking there as either a parking lot or, bless you, or as a parking garage. And part of the reason for that is that in order to redevelop the L&M parcels, some of those municipal, if not all of those municipal parking spaces that are there are going to have to go away. And where do they get picked up? Where do they get, replaced? And then site 3 is the CRA-owned parcel that I mentioned. And during the charrette, the idea was, well, maybe that could be a receiving site for some of the historic structures. And the notion of a beer garden came up. Some of you may remember that. I've got an update on that when we get to that point, which I think is exciting. So we came up with all these different options, option A, option B, option C. We came up with renderings for each one of them. As we went through the report and tested them financially with the pro formas, what we ended up with is really only option C had a chance of being financially viable. And then we went through multiple iterations of option C, which I'll go through with you. But option C ends up with basically the final iteration ends up with 80 new dwelling units within that L&M site. You see the sort of tan shaded buildings. You'll notice the squarish building to the upper right-hand corner facing Lake Avenue and M Street. That's a 5-story building. We took our clues from that, from the counter plan that was done by Fairfax and Salmons earlier, way before our process started. But we believe that that's a building footprint that could be, up to 5 stories there, mixed use, residential, some ground floor retail, and also contain its required parking on site. The other buildings that you see include a 3-story apartment building on L Street, a 3-story apartment building on First Avenue South, and then this version includes the retention of the 4-story walk-up apartment building, which is facing L Street. Excuse me, did I say 4-story? I mean 4-unit walk-up apartment building facing L Street, as well as, of course, the Leisure Services building. And the thought is to actually relocate one of the buildings facing L Street as a unit and bring it over to M Street so that we've got more development capacity along the L Street frontage. Part of the issue with saving the historic structures, A, is what condition they're in, and B, what is the cost to save them? And I know that the city has gone through great lengths to get not only cost estimates, but detailed surveys of the condition that these buildings are in. The other thing to take into consideration, though, is that if you've got 2 or 3 single-family houses that are taking up 3 or 4 lots, if you restore them, that's great. You end up with 2 or 3 units. If you can relocate them or find another use for them somewhere else, you can actually increase the densities up to 3 stories and get more units, which would make the entire development proposal more feasible. The problem is that for every one of these buildings that we had to save, it made the development of the other parcels less likely or less desirable or marketable to the private sector. This is just a view of what that 5-story building facing Lake Avenue might look like. This is a nighttime shot, which is pretty. But you'll notice it's 3 stories, step back at the 4th level, and then again at the 5th level. And as I said, we took, great clues for this from the previous counter plan from Ann Fairfax and her firm. One thing that's noticeable, which should be noted here, is that, and this is something that comes out in the policy recommendations later in the report, is that any of the parcels that are redeveloped facing Lake Avenue, and again, this is the historic district, needs to have civic open space that is publicly accessible. So what you see is a usable plaza right there at the corner. It's not just a complete build out of that site. Oh, and here is we went through a number of pro formas and we were provided the pro forma from Fairfax and Salmons for their proposal, which is absolutely beautiful. The question was, how do we integrate those ideas with the market realities from at the time and incorporate all the community concerns that we heard. Now, obviously, you cannot read this. So what I'm going to do is try to give you a sense of the analyses we went through. And as I mentioned, Tim Hernandez from New Urban Communities is here with us this evening to answer any questions afterwards.
And these were on the website. These were.
Okay, great.
I'm
Yeah, they're in, of course. So we went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different financial pro formas. Starting with the Fairfax plan on the right, we just went through theirs and then adjusted some of the numbers based upon so that we had an apples to apples comparison for the work that we were doing. We found, so going from right to left, there's option B, C, and then C version 2. None of those worked. And at that point, Dana started to panic and reached out to Tim and said, well, what do we need to do to make this work? Some of the assumptions in the earlier pro formas included the following. For instance, all of the land costs would be recouped, $4.65 million. There were some adjustments in construction costs. Also, we were looking at market rate rentals for all of the units. We then adjusted to say, well, what if the land cost to the developer was cut in half and it was $2 million, right around enough to recoup the penny sales tax dollars that went into purchasing many of these parcels. In addition, we looked at some other adjustments, including some TIF tax rebates for the first, I think, 9 years 2 through 11. And a couple of other adjustments too, in terms of unit size and leasable amounts. We also looked at a version 4 of that. So what we ended up with is scenario C that I showed you, the planning scenario seemed to make the most sense. Then we went through and adjusted the pro formas to see, well, what do we have to adjust financially and in terms of a deal long-term to make it, approachable from the development sector. We also considered a long-term lease, like a 99-year lease. And that has some benefits, but it also has some drawbacks. We ended up with the second to the farthest left version, which is version 5. And we met with staff and the manager and assistant manager and the CRA director and Mr. Waters at the end of last year, or actually October of last year. And the concern was that the unit mix was not balanced enough. And I just want to give you an idea. Back then, that version 5 had 63 studio apartments, 16 one-bedrooms, and 10 two-bedrooms. And I think, and 7 historic units. And I think to the credit of your staff and their astuteness, the thought was, well, we need to balance that out more. So we did the final version on the far left-hand side, which includes reducing the number of units from 89 new units to 80 new units. And then having a mix of 27 studios, 28 one-bedrooms, and 25 two-bedrooms. So they're all in the 30% range of the total yield of what the new construction would be. And there was a feeling that it's good to know both. The return on investment for that is slightly less than it is because there's simply fewer units. I mean, it's a math exercise at some point. But with Tim's help, we found that, again, with the $2 million land cost, increasing the unit, the average rental per unit is about $2.80 per square foot. So for 1,000 square feet, you see that's a $2,800 a month unit. Now, 1,000 square feet for a unit is very large. In fact, most, I think, of your two-bedroom houses in the city are probably right around 1,000 square feet. But anyhow, and that also includes the years 2 through 11 TIF rebate. These are provided within the report in painstaking detail. As I said, thankfully, Tim's here this evening. I do a bad impression of him and he can answer any questions you might have. But we continue then to develop some other ideas. I mentioned earlier the K Street concepts where you've got the existing municipal parking lot at K Street just south of Lake. The image to the far left shows the existing conditions. During the charrette and a little bit afterwards, we came up with some concepts for if we wanted to do for sale or leasable townhouse type units or multifamily there. What would that look like and what would the yield be? Since that time, as I said, since we're losing to develop the L&M parcels without going to a parking garage, right? Because once you go to a parking garage, you go back to a big block size building. And in order to pay for all of those very expensive structured spaces, you've got to have more and more units. So it becomes sort of a feedback loop, in development in terms of size and scale. So if you develop L&M at a much smaller scale, but you lose those existing public parking spaces, can we recoup them somewhere else? There's lots of ways to do that. You might enter into an agreement with a church who has an overabundance of parking spaces. It might actually be adjacent to some of these sites. One idea is that to expand the parking lot south, if in fact those buildings are going to go away at First Avenue, you could actually expand the parking lot that's there that would recoup most of them. To Commissioner Maliga's one of your questions that you had during our meetings is how many spaces at the existing municipal lot would be affected by scenario C? Well, we did another count, and I believe that what we'd be losing, the number of spaces that would be affected at that site between L&M is about 48 spaces. I think, though, if you were to go through and restripe and expand the parking lot at K Street, you could probably pick up an additional 30, maybe 30 plus spaces. So it's not a complete loss of 48 spaces. They might just be shifted somewhere else. So that's why we're looking at there's kind of a push and pull for different scenarios. But I can tell you right now, to try to make a project that is financially feasible, that has all of its parking on site, that provides that replaces the existing 48 spaces, public spaces on site, you're going to a big building with structured parking. And so this was the challenge. What are the compromises we're going to have to make? What are is it a greater priority to have the smaller increment of buildings and then maybe have not enough parking at that site, but shift it somewhere else? I mentioned the beer garden, which was a fun idea. What we have learned, though, since the charrette and after our first draft of the report, is that the CRA, Joan, unfortunately, Oliva from the CRA couldn't be here this evening, but she's already working with a housing group to develop affordable housing on that site. And this is another way how these parcels are potentially tied together. None of the units that we're showing in the pro forma for the L&M sites are affordable. Actually, I take that back. Depending upon what definition you use with Palm Beach County, but they're not set aside as affordable units meeting a extreme criteria. However, The CRA is looking to do specifically affordable units at that site at at K and First Avenue. So maybe the units that we don't get as affordable as we'd like at L&M, maybe we pick them up over here. So you see, all of this again is within the Old Town Historic District. So maybe the rules need to be a little bit different there. And I'm rounding the fourth corner here, I promise. As I mentioned, the Old Town Historic District is the most vulnerable area within your downtown. And it deserves to be looked at, we think as a team through a different lens. And if it means that you've got to reduce parking even further, or you have to exempt certain programs that have just been adopted in order to maintain the character, it's worth considering it. You can think about this district differently than the rest of your city because it is a bona fide historic district. So our recommendations along those lines are along those lines. We also provide a lot of hopefully useful diagrams and drawings. For instance, this is a section, what we call a cross section, looking west on Lake Avenue here to the left, and that's where that new 5-story building would be. What you see below that is in plan, and that's what that plaza might look like there. So maybe some of the density that would have gone there can go up on top. Do you know what I mean? So we also recommend, believe it or not, that you have no density maximums in your historic district. Control the box, control the size of the building. But if the units want to be micro units, or if they want to be large units, let the flexibility be with the marketplace. Better you get more smaller units in the same size box, maybe, than fewer, more expensive ones. And finally, again, you can't read this, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of items here. We offer some policy recommendations, some code recommendations that all might be, vetted through staff. Some of it could or could not be included in the next RFP, if in fact there is one. But a couple of highlights for the recommendations, and then I'll be done, ready for questions. As I mentioned, you should really limit any development incentives, streamline the development incentives within this area. As I said, in fact, don't even worry about density within the historic district in downtown. Okay, worry about the building height. We also recommend that you should allow building heights as of right to 3 stories on L and M and South First. Right now, you can get to 3 stories on South First if you do this or if you do that. To take some of the pressure off and make this more developable in this format, if it's desirable, take away some of those restrictions or some of those extra hoops that someone might have to jump through. We recommend your code is very progressive as it is. One of the most progressive codes in South Florida, I can tell you that. But we're saying for this particular area, even go a step further and just limit the parking requirements to 1 space per unit. Right now, it's 1 space per unit, but if your efficiency, you got to add a little bit, or there's some caveats there. But it's 1 space per bedroom, up to 2 bedrooms, up to 2 parking spaces, and then a caveat for efficiencies to provide for visitor parking, which I completely understand. But for this particular area and this particular condition, we're suggesting you streamline it even further. Also, part of if an RFP goes out, we suggest that area that is the corner of Lake Avenue and M Street, where we're recommending 5 stories, up to 5 stories, that building have a maximum building footprint, a limitation of 15,000 feet. And that would fit as we've shown there, but that would also help protect you going forward from, scope creep, or the building getting a little bit bigger, or we're going to take over the alleyway, or, we're going to take over the parking to the south, or, again, we heard over and over and over again, smaller, more incremental buildings. And there's a lot more in here, as I mentioned, in terms of recommendations for the code and what might go into as graphics for the RFP. But in fact, I think that concludes the presentation. And if you have any questions, certainly we'll be here for Tom or Tim or myself. And I'm happy to go back through anything again. As I said, I just tried to touch on some of the key points and not take you through all of the work that was done. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Yes,
I just wanted you to know Joan Oliva is here. She's having some technical difficulties. She's trying to work it out, but she is
Joan?
listening.
okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Joan. Thank you, Sheila. Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. This has been a very complicated and long drawn and dramatic, emotional issue for all of us. How do you want to go forward? Either we can do our comments and questions now, make a motion and then have public comment, or I know I'm sure there's quite a bit of public comment, have a public comment. And then how do you want to do it?
I would like to have an overview of the process with the RFP, like what the next steps are coming out of this meeting. So we're on the same page of what we're here to figure out. And then I would like to hear from public comment before we have our discussion so that we can address some of the things that we've heard through our discussion.
I was thinking the same.
But I do want to hear, so I believe that your agency would be helping us prepare the RFP for this site.
We're not scoped or we're not, scheduled to drafting the RFP with you, but we're not going to leave you. You know what I mean? We're going to work with staff to help come up with whatever goes into that. I think the first step is to decide, is this a direction that you want to go with? And what are the limitations? I mean, I know that there's been a lot of going back and forth about the historic structures, for instance. We coincidentally landed on this version C, scenario C, that kept a few of the buildings that were the ones that we were told a number of months ago we're going to try to keep. That was a coincidence. Is that still the case? The issue of the offsite parking. Can you live with a smaller parking amount in that area? And, as we discussed, lose some public parking for a while until you figure out either an arrangement with another place or the expansion of the lot. So I think there just needs to be from proper direction from this board, what are the things that we can accept in the next RFP? And then we're going to work with William and his staff to help you get that done.
I had a question about the RFP because I was talking to a local small scale developer that does infill. And he questioned whether we should have one RFP for the entire block that is city or CRA owned between L&M, because there might be one developer or one type of developer who's interested in taking on the leisure services building and the other historic structures that we want to save, but they might not be the same developer that wants to do the smaller infill new construction. So that made a lot of sense to me of trying to restrict, like, we have structures we want to save that we've all agreed to, that we want to maintain, but forcing a developer to take those on, where if we broke these parcels back out into smaller chunks and allowed it for an RFP, that either you could look at the whole area between L&M and make a proposal, or you can make a proposal like a piecemeal kind of like for each of these different, like an a la carte, yes. Where, I mean, we talked about that a little bit when we talked about the pool, like, do you want to look at the entire beach complex or do you want to just look at the pool? Like something to provide us with a little more flexibility to get back more proposals in, then we can really truly pick what's right for the city from what we receive. Because I mean, and I think we might be able to recuperate more of our costs that way. Like leisure service building alone, I feel like you could sell for almost $1 million.
Well, and there's that option too. You could just sell the parcels. CRA could just sell the parcels. But it sounds great. But if I were to buy all those parcels, I can build the building that was part of the RFP as of right. So, or close to it. So, be careful what you wish for.
Let me.
I think that I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say to your point, I think that ultimate flexibility is great. I can also see though, where somebody, you really like a proposal that somebody has for that one lot that's right in the middle of where you need to get additional density to make the numbers over here work. They're all interconnected. So I don't know, fracturing that L&M might create more complications. I haven't had a chance to talk to William and Joan about that. I mean, I think smarter minds than me need to look into that.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
along those lines. Are you talking to me, if we were gonna split it up, which I don't know, this is a great idea, would be the L and M project, the L, between L and M and to Lake First as one. And then K through L, that south end as another, and then J through K, the end of the parking lot as a third. Or are you talking about breaking up the actual block on between L and M?
I'm looking at, because I know you guys looked at that entire area, but you said your focus really is right now for between L and M. And so looking at that, there's like a completely vacant lot of land that's next to Leisure Services, and it's a developer that's used to doing infill projects could take just that lot of land. I mean, you're going to just build something on there anyways that is disconnected to the stuff to the west. So does it have to be the same developer that takes all of them? The reason you aggregate all those lands is to build something like the element that was there before. Like if you were with natural infill development, it's not always like one developer fills in this area of land and then they go over there and fill it in there and they go and fill in there. So,
But that's,
and then there's different people who are interested in restoring historic structures. So someone might be more interested in the 2-story 4-unit house that we're saving and wants to restore that and take that on, but doesn't want the empty lot next to it because they don't want to do new construction. There's just different types of people who do different projects.
Understand, yeah.
That was just the thought that I had after talking through someone in the industry, and it made sense to me.
so are we gonna do our comments first, or what are we gonna do? Oh, I thought we were gonna, I mean, that was.
Well, we were talking about process
Yeah.
with the RFP and then getting here from the public.
Okay, so. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I think we're gonna hear just for this meeting, we're gonna take public comment first, because there's a lot of public comment. I have some cards. Madam Clerk, do you have any cards to read? Any comments to read?
I do, Madam Mayor. I have 10, and then we do have someone who's waiting on Zoom to read their own comments.
Okay, let's start with that person to get them taken care of.
Okay, I will promote them now. Mr. Goodstein?
Sam, good evening. You're muted, Sam. We can't hear you.
Hear you.
The best thing that the presentation brings is the recommendation.
I'm sorry, Mr. Goodstein. Can you start with your address, please?
Hello, Sam. You're muted again. Oh, there you go.
All right, I pressed
There you
every button there is and rejoined in every possible way. The best thing that the report brings is the global view, the 10,000 feet. Look at
I
the-
apologize. Can you start with your name and your address, please?
My name is Sam Goodstein, 1717 12th Avenue South, Lake Worth, Florida, 33460, Lot E4. Are we okay now, Shayla?
Oh, Sam.
Are all buttons pressed?
Yes.
10,000 feet. Number one, you're not in a hurry. This is land that we get to decide what to do with once in a generation. Take your time. Number two, take the 10,000-foot view. The restrictions of zoning, looking at the changes in the report that says, tweak those for these areas, give yourself flexibility, give yourself density. Number three, this isn't where you're solving affordable housing. You're going to get some units here, but this is not your burden to solve affordable housing. This is your place where you make Lake Worth the place worth living. Whenever you look at it, you got to say, why does somebody come here? They're not coming for the downtown that we all fear, that everyone always said Delray. What they're coming for is a place where you have walkability, you have live work, you have all these things that are possible on here. All the details, you know, just make the RFP something that supports, and the possibilities are endless here. I don't know if a ground lease is the same as a land trust. That confuses me. But I know that taking the land cost out of the equation is one of the key pieces. It's a good piece of work to have as a support for your decision as a future commissioner, as a future commission. And bringing your vision to it and not just,
Thank you, that's time.
thank you, Shayla, thank you, commissioners and Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Goodstein. Always good to see you. Okay, then would you, we're gonna have the people, I think let's have the people that are here because they're sitting here, they came. Have them I'll call them out by name and I'll give your name and then who's on deck. So David Sims, and on deck is Tom Conboy. It's 2 minutes.
David Sims, 715 North L Street. First, I'd like to point out, the presenter mentioned that there's not going to be affordable housing. It's going to be market rate housing. I don't know the law real well, but I was under the understanding that if you purchase properties with a penny sales tax, you need at least 30% of it to be affordable housing, and it has to be run by the city. Does the city want to run this housing? I think the best alternative is to save the historic properties. If we allow them to be demolished and have a large structure built there, this will take away from the old style charm and the old style architecture. And we're going to lose our unique brand. That has value too. You know, building something large and making a lot of money off it, that has value, but our unique brand also has value, and that has an irreplaceable value. I'd like that we can keep it. Another point I'd like to make is one inspector inspected those houses and deemed it to be more costly to restore than to rebuild. I would like to ask that other inspectors examine the property to get second opinions. Additionally, much of the restoration costs, if we restore the historic houses, much of that cost could be covered by grants from the state of Florida Division of Historical Resources, and you can get energy efficiency grants for things like efficient windows and roofs. We don't have to say yes to every development proposal that comes our way. We've
Thank
approved.
you, that's time.
Thank you, David. And up after Tom is Gregory. No, we're not doing that. Thank you. Pros or cons, we're gonna keep ourselves quiet. Thank you. Tom?
Tom Conboy, 30 South M Street, business owner. First off, I want to say I attended the charrette and it was facilitated excellently. I really enjoyed the participation. I think Treasure Coast did a top-notch job on the charrette. I want to say, though, I am disappointed in the report. There were 3 things I feel are very lacking. One is scenarios where we keep all the historic properties. There's 2 scenarios I think could be looked at very strongly. And that would be bringing grants in for either residential or small business. I think we talked a little bit about a small business incubator.
Address the commission.
Well, I'll do what I want. Sorry. No, you're interrupting me, Mayor.
I'm asking you to address the commission.
It's supposed to be decorum, you address us, not dog.
Let me collect my thoughts for a second here. I do think, though, that we should be looking at these options, looking at all the grants that are possible. That's what Treasure Coast does really well, is looking at grants and how to bring in grant funding. And I would really like to see a small business incubator looked at and a residential scenario looked at. When you look at the cost of these properties, I think it's 5.65 million. These properties, if you look on LoopNet, could easily go for well over 10 million. So we could definitely put them back on the market and make money. Don't need a big condo.
Thank you. Up next is Greg Richter, and then after that Peggy Fisher.
Good evening, Commission, fellow citizens. Greg Richter, 1202 South Palmway, Lake Worth Beach. I'm here. I took part in the shred as well. I like some of the things I saw from Treasure Coast. I personally, I think personally, these historic properties are so-called historic properties at this point in time are pawns in a game here. We have a great piece of property downtown. I have no problem with, obviously this city has rejected the idea of dropping a big box on that property. So where do we go from there? So there's some concepts have come out here with the Villagescape concept, where townhouses, apartment buildings, but to throw money in this process to save these things just for the sake of saving them. We have thousands, we have over 2,000 homes in this city, which 1,000 of them are designated as historic properties. These 5 houses being eliminated at this point, where they are now, if you asked me that 3 years ago, it'd been a different scenario, but where the condition they are now is not an impactful process. I just don't want to see more houses added without the adequate parking. We have no parking up there to begin with. If you're taking away, am I over time?
No.
Oh, okay. If we take away parking to build these and then, we need, more parking here, but we're not going to do enough for the units. Makes no sense. We've got to keep this in mind. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Peggy Fisher, and then up next, Michaela. Oh, no. Up next, the Colmeyer.
Peggy Fisher, 508 North 8th Street. I agree with Mr. Richter that taking away and not having sufficient parking is a major issue. There isn't enough parking at times anyway. And we spent $2.45 million for the parking spaces the city has over by the Bohemian, which was not the best investment in my opinion. But the historic houses, if you call them historic, contributing houses is probably more appropriate. The 2 that are designated for saving and being renovated are appropriate. The other ones need to be demolished. No one wanted to take them and move them. There was a proposal for the CRA to assist with the moving. No one took up any offers to do that. This has been going on since 2018. It is time to make some decision and move forward and quit going back and forth, being sued because someone doesn't like the decision by the Historic Resources Preservation Board that the city commission affirmed, and then going to court and suing it and having more expenses involved. We don't need that. We need to have you all make a decision. And I would like for each of you, as you make your vote and express your opinions, to say why. Not just, I'm against it or I'm for it. I'd like you to specifically say why. Too often you will make a vote and just say what you don't like or do like, but you don't explain yourselves. And I think this is an instance where we need you to explain why you're making this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Cliff Colmeyer, and up after that is Michaela.
Cliff Colmeyer, 503 First Avenue South. And I'd like to thank the commission for starting this process in the first place. I'll try to be really quick because there's a lot of people that want to talk. And thank you very much to Dana Little and the Treasure Coast Planning Council. I think they did a fantastic job. And I don't want to contradict their professional opinion on these things. I think they've done a lot of research. It deserves a lot of credibility. And Kim Stokes asked a really good question about the next step. And it's the next steps that I am very concerned about, because in the previous commission made some big mistakes, and I think the CRA made some big mistakes the first time, which was to throw out an RFP with very little specifications. And let's just see what comes back. And not only were those things not really appropriate, the 3 bids that were returned, but they felt that they had to accept one of them because those were the only 3 that came back. I think our specifications have to be very specific. The first step in doing that would be to adopt some of what Mr. Little mentioned as their code recommendations. I think that the code recommendation concerning limited parking for this little zone, this particular zone, limited parking, a restriction on sustainability bonuses, and a restriction on height, in a very specific code requirements would be a really good way forward to kind of and make the RFP more succinct and more specific. And thirdly, just one last thing is to get professional advice on the way the RFP goes out. I think if you can engage Treasure Coast in that RFP process, we'll get a much better result with this. And I really support the work that they have done. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Michaela, and after Michaela, we have Wes Blackman.
Michaela Clanton, 419 North Ocean Breeze, also the owner of LDAB Subs and Eclective Boutique, both downtown Lake Worth Beach. I feel like I have to start out by questioning why Mr. McVoy has not recused himself, as his employer has been very vocal about his beliefs for this project and has actually initiated a lawsuit with the city because of this. The integrity of the entire commission is in jeopardy when one elected official does not act with integrity. The historical charm of Lake Worth Beach is why my husband and I moved here and purchased a home. So I was not a resident in Lake Worth when the transaction for the homes occurred a few years ago. My concern is specifically the houses on First Avenue between J and K. I have two businesses that back up to that structure. I don't know why they were not maintained when they were initially purchased, but at this point, they are not salvageable. I look at them on a daily basis. These structures are boarded up, they're termite ridden, they're falling in on themselves. They've become homes for rodents, stray animals, drug addicts, and prostitutes. I can tell you that these blighted structures are not good for my business, and they're not good for any other business in town. We hinder our growth as a community and leave the impression to visitors that we're dirty because we've allowed these structures to continue to become dilapidated. The cost to save these structures is much more than we can afford. Right now, the city is looking at how to afford a new pool, $10+ million. The sidewalks in my neighborhood are collapsing. The streets are full of potholes. We need more city staff. All of that takes priority over trying to revamp structures that don't truly have a purpose any longer. Once those structures are demolished, they can become that much needed parking that we need. We need at least a double-decker
Thank
parking.
you, that's
garage.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wes, and after Wes, Todd Townsend. Good evening.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, Commissioners, Wes Blackman, 241 Columbia Drive, once a resident of 509 First Avenue South, which is right across from this area. I'm former chair of the Historic Resource Preservation Board and current president of the Cottages of Lake Worth, Inc., the nonprofit organization responsible for the publication of the award-winning Cottages of Lake Worth book. I'm also a certified urban planner with a significant amount of experience in historic preservation. Speaking tonight as a 30-year resident, I'd like to remind everyone that the city of Lake Worth Beach has 6 historic districts, 3 of which are on the National Register. There are a total of 2,653 properties within those districts, of which 1,607 are considered contributing. That was when the districts were established. Through resurveying and the passage of time, the concentration of structures contributing to the quality of those historic districts is much higher today. We estimate that there are roughly 1,000 properties in Lake Worth Beach which meet the definition of a cottage at or less than 1,000 square feet on a 25 or 50-foot wide lot and built before World War II. The concentration of historic structures in a town the size of Lake Worth Beach is unique in South Florida. This is the city's fingerprint, and it puts it in a category of other cities known for their historic structures. The conclusion here is that the demolition or relocation of any of these structures will not take away the city's historic identity. Having an attractive downtown commercial area with quality housing or lodging possibilities will enhance the city's exposure as that city historic city in Florida with a high concentration of beach cottages. My message here is to do something, please. Follow through on decisions by your advisory boards, building official, and your own consensus made at public meetings. The next step is to let the demolition of these structures happen so that the new development can take its place.
Thank
Please
you, that's time.
or get out of the way. Thank you.
Todd Townsend, up next is Drew Bartlett.
Hi, Todd Townsend, 502 South J Street. I said we reject this plan. I mean, how deep in the Everglades water are we here with all this? I think we should reject this plan because originally it's going to canyon into downtown. And originally it said nothing about this gigantic parking garage that would have to be built until somebody brought it up during the charrette. It would destroy the continuity of the parking that we do have, causing the necessity for this giant parking tower, which nobody wants. I spoke to Officer Bear myself. He agrees that event style parking becomes dangerous in the nighttime hours. Okay, it's having somebody have to walk from downtown. Maybe you've had a couple of drinks, you got to walk out of town. Anything could happen late night. Let me tell you, I'm out there, I know. And so we don't want people building bedrooms overlooking the downtown. We don't want an exclusive square built downtown. There should be a really good plan behind bulldozing these houses, which we don't have. Aside from the houses on the three units on K Street should be bulldozed down because they were never taken care of. And right there, we could put some 35 parking spaces in, which is going to help us a lot because the main goal here should be to actually develop First Avenue. And we should keep that green area green. And right next to the green area within the same block is where we remove the house on M Street, the Leisure Services building, put it right there. And now you've got an extra space for another maybe 50 parking spaces. So 30 or 40 and by the K Street and J, and then 30 right behind the council building there. And then almost 50 spaces right in that spot where the M Street building is, the Leisure Services building. That's going to do us for parking for a long time. Our plan needs to be parking, and we don't have money. We don't got the money to do all this stuff that they want to do. We need to build.
Thank you, that's time.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Todd. Up next, Drew Bartlett. And then I have one from Kara Jennings to read.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, for having this meeting tonight. I really appreciate your dedication, your public service on this very important topic. My name is Drew Bartlett. I'm at 211 North L Street. I was on the CRA board when the first RFP was done. And what we saw in the election cycle following that RFP was a drumbeat about transparency in the CRA and transparency on these projects. And as I sat there, I was like, this isn't good. This is not good. And so right after the election, I worked with one commissioner I knew, Mr. McVoy, and the CRA to say, we need to get something transparent done here about these properties. What ideas do we have? And the charrette was born. So after working with the CRA board and the CRA to fund it, thank you very much, commissioners, for supporting that. When you said, yes, we will get behind the charrette process. And let me tell you, this looks like transparency, right? This is what transparency feels like. Everyone's getting a voice. They've had a voice. So I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing right now. My encouragement is let's move this over to the CRA, this process. I have talked with Joan today, and she says, as we develop an RFP, that will come before the board or whatever in a public process as well, so that everyone gets a chance to look at that RFP and make comments on it. Certainly, as they get reviewed, a commissioner, if you're, is probably available. If you're available, maybe you could sit on the review board. That just all kinds of law decisions that have to be made about that. But it's important here, it's transparent to now, it stays transparent and something gets done. I do believe it's important to move forward and get something done here. The CRA heard from a public that there are exotics now growing on the properties. And I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about plants. Right? I understand.
Thank you, that's time.
Move forward is essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kara Jennings, left, so her name's here and H20.
Not here, why are you reading her card? If I'm not here, my card doesn't get read, it goes to the city clerk, it gets put in the file.
Excuse me, Greg.
Not fair.
Excuse me, Mr. Richter. I hear you. But we've done this before. I mean, she should have done it to the email, but it's here
You
and,
got it before for her and no one else.
well, no one else is, yes, that's
That's absolutely not true.
let's just keep going. Let's keep going. I appreciate the board's effort to make the project an example of thoughtful infill development. Historic properties should be saved, just as we ask residents to preserve their properties. So should the city direct staff to include those historic properties into any development plan for the project, apply for the grants to support this effort. At a cost of $150,000, this plan should have reflected the public input that wanted preserved and affordable housing. Thank you. Up next, Richard Stowe. After that, Tom Osterholt.
Good evening. My name is Richard Stowe, 414 North Federal Highway. I want to thank all those who have taken various positions about the district over the past 4 years. It's good to have a broad conversation. The Florida Trust for Historic Preservation is concerned about these structures that some of us in our community do not care about or do not see the potential for. They awarded they gave the award to the city of Lake Worth Beach's Old Town Historic District in July of 2021, based on those contributing and non-contributing structures. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has offered like pro bono legal counsel for, I would say, either with past staff or present staff, hours of advice to concerned citizens interested in preserving the historic fabric in the Old Town Local Historic District. The discussions that people are having about parking, we're all concerned about parking. If you're concerned about parking, I strongly urge you to check out the book Parking and the City that was edited by Donald Shue. He's written a very strong introductory chapter, and everyone will benefit from reading that, and it will help enhance our city discussions. The issues of yes, we need to get something done right away. And that is restore 9 of these historic structures that need restoration. And they are in various conditions.
Thank you. That's time.
Whoa.
Thank you. Tom Osterholt and Ann Fairfax out on deck.
Tom Osterholt, 2111 Notre Dame Drive. I understand, and being a fairly new resident of Lake Worth, I did a little research, and I might be repeating a few things, but I think it's very relevant. There are 6 historical districts in our city composed of over 2,600 buildings, of which over 1,000 meet the definition of a cottage. The demolition of a few of these structures that are falling down will not negatively impact our historic districts in any way. The city appropriately hired a professional to look at whether these housing structures could be restored. And I looked at the report, and the report showed that on average, it was over $300,000 per structure. I think that's almost $2 million. This makes absolutely no sense at all. With respect to the last speaker, it would be wonderful if we lived in the perfect world and we had all the money in the world that we could do whatever we wanted, but we don't. We have limited resources. You're working on other projects. I think the plan that was submitted today by the Treasurer Coast, I fully support. This has been going on for 4 years. With respect to Mr. Conboy, I might note that he was at a CRA meeting that I was at, and they pointed out that these homes were put up for sale to anybody that wanted to buy them for $1. He could have bought all of them. All he had to do is make a commitment to restore them. He chose not to. In fact, anyone that is opposed to tearing these homes down could have bought them for $1, and they chose not to do it. So the city is now left with the ability to go forward and do something positive for our city. And I strongly urge you to move forward on this because it is the right thing to do and it is in the best interest of our residents. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ann Fairfax?
Ann Fairfax, 226 South L Street. Many of you have said what I'd hope to say, especially about trying to save the cottages. But I just want to say one constructive thing, and in support of some of the comments that the commission has said. City of West Palm Beach has a parcel just north of the canal on the west side of Dixie. And they had an RFP out and they had several proposals and they put it up on their website and they had the public vote on them. I thought it was an amazing process. And it would be something, and I'd appreciate what Drew said, that greater commitment to transparency between the CRA and the town and the city of Lake Worth would really go a long way to healing a lot of the rifts we've had. I, for one, am very embarrassed I'm a current and newly appointed member of the CRA, and I'm very grateful for that because I can now really understand the inner workings and perhaps make some suggestions on how we can, move forward in a more positive way with the community. But I am very embarrassed that the buildings that the CRA now owns have been allowed to be, I wouldn't say destroyed because they can be renewed, but there is that sense that there is a demolition by neglect. Now, anybody in this city, any landowner, any property owner is subject to great fines when they are allowed to let their property go to seed. And for some reason, the CRA has been exempt from any fines. Now, they can find the money somehow to demolish these buildings. There didn't seem to be any problem with that.
Thank you. That's time.
Thank you very much, Ann. Is anybody else out there that sometimes I miss people, if you sent in a card and I haven't called your name, please come forward, or this is your last call for public comment. Once, twice. Madam Clerk, will you please read the comments that we received? Did I get a hand? On the website? Yeah. So she will read them. Oh, okay. What's your name? Jill. Oh, Jill. I don't have my glasses on. All right. We're going to allow Jill to come up and give her statement. And then Madam Clerk, you don't need to read hers.
Okay, not a problem, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. I'm going to try and read it. I can't read it too well on my phone, but thank you, city officials who work for us. I wasn't thinking about it, but I really agree with what Ann was saying. Oh,
I'm sorry, Ms. Carlin, name and address, please.
Thank you.
Jill Carlin. I live at 2381 Sunset Avenue, apartment 205, Lake Worth Beach, 33461. The buildings have been left neglectfully left by the CRA, and that is a big problem. They are historic contributing structures. The plans that I saw look very much like the two plans submitted previously. They all boast an imposing 5-story building at the corner of Lake and M, disrespectful of our brand, which is 20th century South Florida beach vernacular architecture. That's our brand. Did you know that the 600 square foot building at Havana Hideaway, built in the 1930s, where you plan to erect a 5-story thing, is one of only 2 residential buildings still remaining on Lake Avenue? By imposing a grandiose 5-story edifice without consideration of the scale of our city, you destroy the integrity of our small-scale city, history for the future generations to enjoy the quote, old town, which has received a lot of awards. And the character of the old town. Put that beautiful big building that you designed on Dixie Highway where it belongs. Why don't you get 3 or 4 other bids, as is customary and prudent, and as opposed to only one bid that you present for the cost to preserve all of the contributing structures. Put them back on the market. They're about 5 times their original value, and they were assembled for the purpose of making one gigantic development, unfortunately. There are many people who would love to live or create a business in a renovated historic structure in our adorable downtown before it is destroyed.
I'm sorry, that's time.
This way, we could easily keep the integrity of the old town, create new opportunities for
Thank you,
small
Jill.
businesses.
Thank you, Jill.
And thank you. Keep the charm.
Thank you very much. Hey, Madam Clerk, you're gonna read the first 10? I know I have at the website and read whatever has been sent in. I don't know if the other commissioners have done that, but I think. Yeah, I see you've got it up. I'm eavesdropping on your laptop. Madam Clerk, why don't you go ahead and read the first 10 that were submitted?
The first comment is from Brendan Lynch at 920 South Lakeside Drive. I am sorry I am not able to be at this meeting. The CRA and the city have been working hard to find the right solution for these properties. It was agreed to bring in a third-party consultant at a significant cost to help guide us all through the process. I would like to ask the commission to follow through with approving the findings. The city has condemned certain structures. Based on this action and the attendance of the 3 sitting city commissioners at one of our CRA meetings, the CRA vote to demo these dangerous structures. The CRA board authorized me to sign a demo contract. The contractor is in for permits, and I am told they are being held up. My ask is to commit to a plan and move forward together for the benefit of all. There is a very vocal group of people that live/work near these properties, but they are public properties that should benefit all, even those who are not that vocal. The second is from Aaron Allen, 208 South Lakeside Drive. At the onset of my remarks, I am asking Commissioner McVoy to recuse himself from any vote on the subject that has come before you this evening. He has demonstrated a deep personal bias in opposition to the L&M project in its totality and the demolition of any structures that would make this property a reality. In October 2019, the Historic Preservation Board voted to allow the demolition of the dilapidated structures in this zone to open the way for redevelopment. On November 12th, Commissioner McVoy's employer, Thomas Conboy, wrote a letter to the city asking to appeal that decision. Commissioner McVoy also authored a letter to the city at that time, and it mirrored verbatim Thomas Conboy's letter and was on the letterhead of South Florida Engineering and Consulting, LLC, his boss's company and his employer. This letter was in complete opposition to the project. Unhappy with the outcome of that appeal, Thomas Conboy sued the city of Lake Worth, filing a writ of certiorari in February of 2020 that was ultimately denied by a judge in 2021. Clearly, Commissioner McVoy cannot be fair and impartial in this process since he and his boss vehemently oppose this, and therefore for the betterment of the community and to avoid any appearance of impropriety, he should recuse himself from voting tonight. The City Commission had consensus for the demolition of the subject buildings, but when the new commission was seated, they required the CRA to expend $100,000 to hire the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to do a study to see what was the best, most financially feasible plan and to see if the structures could be saved. They held 5 days of public charrettes so the residents could weigh in on this and give their thoughts and recommendations. Out of those charrettes came several possible plans. The next is from Elizabeth Arvello, 2503 North Dixie Highway. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Arvello. I am opposed to the City Commission trying to go back on its word to accept the recommendations made by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I am asking you to accept the recommendations you already agreed to and work collaboratively with the community and all stakeholders. Do not continue to waste tax dollars and put the health and safety of our residents at risk. Thank you. Sam Smith, 109 North Palmway. I love living in a city that can't afford playgrounds or proper trash pickup or to pave its streets, but somehow we have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on experts and consultants. Sometimes we pay different consultants to opine on the same project, so we have dueling expert opinions, and we seem to pay a lot of different experts just to then ignore them. Said another way, this is a terrible use of our precious tax dollars. Mary Kelly, 510 North Ocean Breeze. I am opposed to the City Commission trying to go back on their word to accept the recommendations made by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I am asking you to accept the recommendations you already agreed to and work collaboratively with the community and all stakeholders. Do not continue to waste tax dollars and put the health and safety of our residents at risk. Thank you. Alex Schultz, 612 2nd Avenue South. Overall, the plans are a disaster. My apologies. They look like someone tried to fit square pegs into round holes, misguided social engineering. They do not attract visitors between the hours of 9 and 4 to come to our historic town and its businesses. Consider using the properties to create a yesteryear village, even asking the county if they could relocate yesteryear village here. The city museum could even be relocated to the village. Many cities have the large brown exit signs on the interstates for the city's old town. Visitor attractions should be the first step before special interest buildings were studied. Commercial establishments could then have been built adjacent to the village core. Substantially increased property heights on any part of Lucerne and Lake west of Dixie and east of M Street are fine, but increased heights on Lake east of Dixie and west of M would destroy the possibility of creating a historic core downtown appearance. Not having the Bohemian and the mid 1 or 2 stories higher were missed opportunities. The next one is from Amy. I apologize if I messed up your last name. Cabsinel, 20 Harvard Drive. I am opposed to the City Commission going back on their word to accept the recommendations made by the Treasure Coast Regional Council on L and M Street land parcels. Considerable time and effort from stakeholders in the community, not to mention taxpayer expense, went into the Treasure Coast Regional Council recommendations. It was the result of structured community input that led to a compromise of various points of view. This type of compromise is what the City Council should applaud. It's time to stop rethinking past decisions and move forward. Revitalizing our neighborhoods is important to Lake Worth Beach residents and businesses. Continuing to do nothing with properties is a financial burden to us all. In addition, there are health, safety, security, and crime concerns associated with the stall, do nothing approach. Please do not continue to waste tax dollars, time, and put the health and safety of our residents at risk. The next one is from Mary Lou Manchin at 27 Harbor Drive. This project has been researched and reviewed. Experts were hired, money was spent, and recommendations made. Mr. McVoy has demonstrated a personal bias to this project and therefore is neither fair nor impartial and should recuse himself from this process. This project needs to move forward now. The next one is from Gail Silverblatt, 414 North Ocean Breeze. I keep looking at the options in the backup for the L&M workshop and wonder where did the creative ideas from the public charrette? The discussion at the charrette of walking through shady vias from L Street or M Street and finding courtyards with seating for people to stop and chat seems to have been forgotten. The helpers from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council who aided the discussion at our tables encouraged us to not think about parking, as parking can be found on alleyways and small parking spaces spread throughout the project. But if you look at the options for Site 1, it appears that parking is of utmost importance and overwhelms the project, not hidden away as was proposed at the Charette. As has been pointed out many times, we all like the Fairfax and Salmon's proposal shown on page 9. Even TCRPC liked the spacing and division of the building shapes and sizes, yet the new options do not reflect the diversity of building heights, shapes, and footprints from their proposal. If looking at the aerials of the options versus the proposal, then the proposal looks more dense, but that is because some of the parking is underneath the townhouses and not placed beside them. The last one is from Amy Ferreter, 30 South J Street. I live adjacent to the derelict properties you are discussing tonight. They are dangerous structures and becoming a magnet for criminal activity. You spent more than $400,000 on studies and frivolous lawsuits related to the properties that the city and the CRA have assembled for redevelopment project. Please listen to the experts from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. You contracted with them to facilitate public outreach and develop solutions based on community input. They did that. There is a pattern of this commission second-guessing experts when their professional advice isn't in line with a commissioner's personal opinions and whims. Please don't let self-appointed experts derail this project again. Let the process move forward and make way for a safe place to live with economic diversification, tourism development, and downtown redevelopment. That is my last comment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right. So we talk about a next step, and I just want to kind of get some clarification for the next step. The next step, William, and we're all going to have comments. Everybody's going to have comments. The next step would be for us tonight to make a motion to approve or disapprove going forward with an RFP that we would then have input into the specifics of, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not the final, what is on paper here is not the final, this is what it's going to be. This is the guideline for us.
No, it's a guy, for the record, William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. As we've spoken before, it's a guideline to give you some parameters that you might want to include in the RFP and how it might be evaluated. The suggestions from Commissioner Stokes is perfectly plausible to have that as an option in the RFP. It could be one developer who has sub-developers. I've worked with developing communities where there's a global developer and then within it, little parts of it are done by a different type of developer, either for affordable housing or townhouses or multifamily. So breaking it apart, but having them collaborate together or break apart and do them individually is an option. Some of the recommendations that Mr. Little has made can be included in the RFP, such as a parking waiver. As a reminder, when we were doing affordable housing for CRA, we did change the parking requirement in the CRA district to one space per dwelling unit at one point. I know that doesn't make everybody happy to have a parking that small or that low. There are a number of code changes that have already been made that facilitate some of the things that were there. Micro units, we have that now. The Sustainable Bonus Program works a little bit different than it did. And the developments, all of them, including Ms. Fairfax's, could be developed with the rules we have in place. I do want to go on the record again is that, and as I was on the evaluation committee, the element did not meet hardly any of our rules. And people have, used that as a rallying cry. It could never have been approved the way it came in. The reason that developer was selected is they had a really strong financial background and were open to working with staff to come up with a plan that actually could follow the historic preservation design guidelines, the major thoroughfare guidelines, the rules in the LDRs, and a number of other things. And so I think it's a little disingenuous that has come up so often, is that plan, that proposal could not have been built, and the other two could not have either. It seemed the other two didn't bother to read some of the things that were included in the RFP originally, because we had the historic preservation guidelines, the major thoroughfare guidelines. My number was there. The various links to the LDRs and how you could work with it was there. And so it has been sad that we've gone through all of this because a developer chose to put a scenario together that I think no one, including the CRA and staff, could get behind because it couldn't be approved no matter what we did.
Thank you. So we have, let's do public. Chris, you got your light on first. Go ahead first. And I think we'll have one round for everybody. I'll just call, call them.
Okay, I do have a number of things. I think this is a really important step for our community. I'm very appreciative of the joint effort between the CRA and the City Commission to have the charrette. Mr. Bartlett is correct that he noticed after the election that probably there was a reflection in the community that the direction things were going was not quite right. And we did communicate as how we could perhaps head to something more stronger public involvement. As I said at the last Treasure Coast Council meeting, which I now serve on, I really appreciate the public charrette that was done organized by the Treasure Coast. I thought that it brought together a very wide range of people in our community. I thought there was a lot of good open exchange of ideas. My impression was quite a bit of consistency in sort of the wishes of the community across a wide range of people. So I was very positive about that effort. I think we've heard from a few people that there seems to be a little bit of, hey, what happened between the charrette and what happened and getting to the final report? If I had to guess, because I don't know the answer, but it seems like there was more excitement about the charrette. There's somewhat less enthusiasm about the things that are in the report. I'm guessing that part of what happened is what some people call value engineering. We looked at all the nice ideas that were in the charrette and said, well, don't know whether we can make that work financially. My understanding of this process, and it might be incorrect, so I hope somebody will correct me if it's incorrect, is that the idea here, we're not putting what's been drawn by the Treasure Coast Planning Council out as, hey, developer, come and build this. This is more to capture what the community is likely to be happy with if you come with something that incorporates some of these visual ideas, some of these massings and textures and layouts and all those things. It's not meant as a, first drawing for the architect or the designers. They'll come up with that. If that understanding is correct, perhaps we shouldn't have valued energy quite as many things out. Leave it as aspirational to give the developer, hey, some idea. These are the kinds of directions that we want to go. I've got a couple other elements. One element, my name came up quite regularly in the public comments. And the suggestion has been I should recuse myself because I had strong opinions about the previous project. I have checked with Glenn Thurcivia about what are the requirements for recusing. In addition, the other side of that, what are the requirements of an elected official to have to vote on things? You cannot simply choose to recuse yourself because somebody says you should. There has to be a legal basis for it. We can ask whether there's any basis. My understanding is there isn't, but again, I'm happy to be corrected. For the record, my pay from my supposed employer last year, South Florida Engineering Consulting, I just looked it up, was $1,440. So don't get too excited about, my connection to any particular employer. Thinking more generally about this project, we've heard quite a bit from the community that we are a historic city and we have 6 historic districts. We have lots of historic cottages, all of which is completely true. I have no differing view on that. However, I think it's a little disingenuous to bring that part in. That affects the neighborhoods in our city. And what we do to protect historic cottages in the neighborhoods is clearly important, clearly influential on the neighborhoods. That is a very different question to what is the flavor and character of our downtown. I think what I've heard over many years, 25 years of living in this city, I forget how many years, 12, 10, something or other of serving as an elected official. I've heard over the years many, many times from people, because I tend to ask them regularly, hey, why'd you move to Lake Worth? Why did you choose Lake Worth? If you're coming from California, you're coming from New York, you're coming from far away, you could move anywhere in South Florida. Why bother to pick Lake Worth? And almost invariably, I get a response that it was an intentional choice because they liked something about the character of our city. I feel strongly, and I opposed the project, which was quite true. I did oppose the element. I feel that it is our responsibility as elected officials to try to figure out what is it that makes our city an attractive place for people to come to. Figure out in our steps forward, are we enhancing that attraction or are we diluting it? Of course, we are going to need to build new buildings in our city. There's no question. You always have to build new buildings. Sometimes buildings burn down, whatever reasons. But what we do as new buildings and how we treat our historic buildings should be done from the angle of how do we strengthen our brand as a city that is known as different, perhaps more authentic, perhaps more real, perhaps more historic than much of the rest of South Florida. How do we make moves forward that strengthen that rather than dilute it, as I've said? That's my guiding thing. Do I look at the historic buildings that are within the footprint here and say, oh my gosh, you know, those remind me of my last trip to St. Augustine. They're amazing historic buildings. No, of course not. St. Augustine started in 1500 something or other. South Florida had nobody in it. When I did the research for a book on the Everglades and looked into this stuff, there were 100, 200 people here in 1900 or 1910 in all of South Florida. There's 8 million now. So our oldest structures are not going to be very historic. It wasn't a wealthy community. These aren't going to be amazing things. However, older buildings give a feel and a texture to a community that's different than brand new buildings. And in our thinking about what we want to allow to keep, what we want to put some effort into allowing to keep, or do we want to reconstruct some of them and make a new building that looks very much like the old one? That is an option. I don't tend to think it's a very good one, but it is an option. I suspect it's more expensive and not worth it. You're better off restoring them. That's my guiding principle on how do we strengthen our brand as a city. So I very much appreciate the designs. I do have some concerns that maybe we were a little too quick to value engineer, if that's the correct guess on it. Some of the more innovative things out, and I hope that we can find a way to move forward. I very much hope that we will keep the Treasure Coast Planning Council involved in the RFP process. I think that's very important. I thought the comments, I was also aware of West Palm Beach's RFP process for the area just north of the canal. We can certainly learn from that and perhaps adopt some things to keep strong public involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Malega?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to be long-winded. I will say a couple things. During the charrette, one of the first things I think I brought up to Mr. Little was the historical museum is a great asset to our city. And if we could move that into any of these parcels and make it a walkable focal point for the downtown. And it's funny because I brought this up in a meeting the other night and then I just heard Alex say it on the comment. And I think that's something that we as electeds in our city owning that parcel can think forward about and maybe include that with the RFP. How do we make that a downtown walkable center point, like to get people into the community, right? Just versus Lake and Lucerne. I have two concerns, and I'm going to look to the city manager and legal. Number one, I as an elected knew nothing about a letter that was written on behalf of anybody to the city to sue us from the city commission. And if that is the truth, I'm very upset about the fact because we usually know about every lawsuit that comes along. How are we not, as a board, notified of this said letter?
Did that happen before we were elected?
But we still should have known because he's an elected.
Well, Okay.
No, it was it was brought forward in 2020, the lawsuit was heard in 2021. From what that person just heard or said, I mean. So I'm a little taken back by that because I wasn't brought forward and said, hey, by the way, there's an elected, this is what happened. But this was before he was elected, if that was the case. Because right now it's just hearsay. So I would like some clarification on that. Back on May 18th, we were presented all the possible fixtures, non-fixtures. What are we going to do with these buildings? We all voted, said, yes, let's move forward. Sadly, we have to demolish the majority of the buildings. I was sad to hear that permits are being held up in our city department for something we've already voted on. The CRA's already voted on moving forward. They got a great value on the demo. So that makes me wonder, why are they being held up? Who's holding up the plans? Is this just hearsay? Or is it something that somebody in staff said, stop? This is what's being done on the outside. So can we get clarification on that? I am in favor of this program. As Mr. Little had mentioned, I did inquire as to how many parking spots we're going to lose versus gain. What's our net? How do we get more? Because parking is a major concern in downtown. We have business owners who every 4 hours have to let their employees run out to move their cars so they don't get a ticket. And then we have employees who are towed after 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning because they're closing up restaurants and bars. So it is a concern, and it's a valid concern with this project. It's not our job to figure out what makes us attractive or what attracts people to move here. As an elected, I think that my job is to listen to the residents, the business owners, and to do what's best for the city and the future of the city. I don't believe that we will have many opportunities to make such a positive impact as we will with this program and this project. We can make something positive happen. We can bring in new homes. We can keep historicals. To me, it's just got a perfect blend of everything. I'm sad that we can't have the green space as well, but we do need more affordable homes. We know that. So I'm in favor of voting to move forward with this, but with keeping a very close eye on the RFP process and what is presented to us and how we move forward with it. Thank you.
Commissioner Stokes.
Oh, yeah, I have a few questions. So maybe legal can help clarify with the RFP process, because I really want to make sure that we are involved in establishing the criteria and making sure that the criteria is written in a way that we can make sure that we're definitely getting back something that will not ruin the integrity of our historic neighborhoods. But I thought, like, once we have that RFP out and we have the scoring criteria and we get these different results back, how much are we allowed to let public opinion influence us? So I think it's great to put them all up on the website and hear from the public and everything else. I'm just curious what impact that can have on our scoring process or our selection of which proposal to go through.
Madam Mayor, if I may respond.
Please.
So- Is it on now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with any RFP, what dictates how you make a decision is the criteria and the process you set forth in the RFP. So that is a decision that needs to be made. And I don't know if the decision has been made in terms of whether the RFP will be done through a joint effort of the CRA and the city, or how that's going to be handled. But deciding on that process, that criteria, and how much weight or emphasis a public vote like they did in West Palm Beach would have on that process is something that ideally is laid out in the RFP and decided on ahead of time. So there's no question that when you get down to that voting process and determining who, to potentially award to, that process already set in stone and there's no question.
Okay, great. I do hope that, well, I'm not going to hope, I'm going to insist that the reviewing of the RFP before it goes out is a joint effort between the city and CRA.
If I might add to what Godot said, the RFP that was floated in West Palm Beach had a lot of specificity in terms of ensuring that it was financially feasible. They had a laundry list of things that had to be included. And that's where we would vet them initially when they come back to actually, do they make dollars and cents from that standpoint? Because we had one that wanted the city to basically float them financially until they were able to be solvent. Well, that was not an option. Great, lovely idea. So we can help put together, for instance, if you feel like, which I think is there's consensus, we need our $2 million back for the PD sales tax. That could be in the RFP. The minimum sale price for land is $2 million and maximum on the TIF. I've got a laundry list of things in here, such as maintaining the alleys, underground utilities. You have to have a civic open space. The limit on how many stores could be on Lake or Lucerne is a max. There's a whole variety of things that could be in the RFP as parameters they have to fit within in order to have a proposal that's deemed qualified, because often our RFPs are reviewed by purchasing here, and some of them are thrown out because they weren't responsive. We can have quite a series of elements in it, and we'll probably get a lot of things like we got before that with the terms that we would like to have now will be considered unresponsive and they will be chunked out. So yeah, I commit to working with the CRA and you all, and we will come up with a laundry list of things that we feel will help further ensure that whatever gets proposed there can go through a process and be approved.
And be financially
feasible. Yes.
Great, it sounds so interesting, but I'm just thinking, oh, my experience wasn't that we could take public opinion into like scoring. So
a lot of public opinion.
We take it, but when it comes to scoring it, we have to, we have to live up to our deal with the developers who put in the time to send in the proposals. We can't like spring any
For
like.
example, one of the criteria that gets points is like, so it would be too simplified, but which one ranks highest with the community, you get 3 points. If you came in second, you get 2. And if you came in third, 1, and the rest of you get 0. It's a little elementary what I'm proposing, but that could be included as part of the selection criteria.
Great. The other thing I just wanted some clarification on is it the recommendation of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council which structures we demolish and which ones we don't? I just want to clear things up for the public because there were a lot of comments that kept repeating that you guys did the investigation and you came to us with this recommendation. Well, I just want him to clarify for the public.
Dana Little, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. William, help me out with the history on this a little bit.
Well, I can answer the question for you. Based on your meeting in May, we presented all the information and staff received a consensus that we were going to save 2 buildings and 17 South M Street, which is the 3rd and 4th building. We gave that to the Treasure Coast because it was kind of pointless to put together a plan or not have a plan that did not have that consideration taken in place. And so that's why the version C's, some of the buildings started dropping off because they were not going to be there. And I'll defer to the city manager and I'll help her out with why the demolition permits haven't been issued. Anyway, pardon? Oh, I can answer. I'll defer to you and I'll back you up on it.
Commissioner Maliga, thank you, Madam Mayor. Wanted to clarify a few pre-agenda meetings ago. There was some questions brought up by the commission concerning some public input or comments that they received concerning demolition of these historic properties. And so it was a consensus at that meeting that we would hold back. At that time, I believe, and maybe William could clarify that, whether we received the permits at that time. I don't think we received the permits at that time, but we were asked to hold off on demolishing those properties until this discussion and presentation from Treasure Coast. So that's what we've done. But I'm not sure if we even received the permits at that time.
I think maybe the permit applications were in, but the part 1, which encouraged the historic preservation sign off and evidence that rodents have been dealt with and lead-based abatement and asbestos had not been received. So the permit applications, I believe, were in. They couldn't be issued until those steps were taken. And right, I was on vacation, but I was listening. That we would wait and get a little bit more direction from you before and I think the demolition permits are fundamentally ready to be issued. They could be issued probably by next week.
My concern is with that, and I just answered this, when we have consensus on the dais, we make a decision. If there is 5% of a community that starts putting pressure on us, it's our job to uphold the decisions that we've made. And I feel bad for staff and for the CRA and for the CRA board when we've given direction in May 18th, and said, go forth. staff at the CRA spends their time and money, they get their bids, they make recommendations, the board approves it, and then we go, we got a little pushback from 5% of the people, let's pause. That sends a really bad signal that we are puppet strings up here and that we can stop things once we have them in motion. And it makes me feel uneasy as not just a commissioner, but as a resident, that kind of pull can be had. So I'm just gonna ask if when we make decisions up here and we give staff direction, we're giving them marching orders to go forth and spend time and money and resources. I don't think it's right for us just to go, we're getting a little pushback, let's pause that. I mean, we'll never get anywhere if we continue to do that.
Okay, but
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, Commissioner
For
Diaz.
what? And I'm not looking to be political, but it's just, there's a frustration that I took the time and researched all the money that had to go into these, what they would be worth. We all made a decision and we were concise. And then it's like, let's pause that. And they're just, we need to be clear, because if we're trying to get people to invest in the city and to take us seriously, we need to put action behind the words we say. And that's the last thing I'll say tonight.
thank you. Mr. Diaz has not spoken.
Oh, I still have, I'm
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm asking questions, so it takes, I haven't put my line on it, just
Keep one here.
so I just wanted to clear that up.
Are you through with me? I'm sorry. I don't mean that way, but I mean, did that somehow answer your question?
Yes, you did not recommend it. Oh, I had one extra question though, separate from that. We heard a lot about how great your team is at finding grants and things like that to help preserve historical structures and things like that. So I was just wondering if you could, it's always challenging when we hear about all these funding opportunities right when we have to like make a decision. It's like, well, why didn't we look at all these funding opportunities before? So when I just want to hear from you and your experience with going after grants to help preserve historic.
We don't typically go after grants for historic preservation.
Okay.
That's not what we do as an agency. We have helped cities with grant writing in the past. I think your historic resource preservation board and staff would be your historic preservation staff would be the ones to do that. We'll do whatever we can to help, of course, but that's not our forte.
Okay.
Our involvement here in Lake Worth Beach with historic preservation was writing your historic preservation design guidelines, that big thing. But, you know, again, we're here to help however we can, but I can't stand here and tell you that we have expertise at writing grants for historic preservation or restoration. There are folks that mentioned tonight, National Trust, Florida Trust. I'm certain there's lots of money out there, but we haven't pursued that on your behalf.
Okay. And then have you heard from, it was said that in July of 2021, Florida Trust had started turning some more attention to the city. So are we aware of any involvement they want to have?
There was a nomination by a private entity to have the area designated as one of the 11 or 10 endangered historic preservation areas in the country. And I believe the Florida Trust included it in their list of endangered historic areas in Florida. The grant opportunities in historic preservation, and I've been in that field for, I hate to admit, 35 years now, but we're limited. Most of the public money that can come in requires to be a public purpose. The special category grant can be as much as $500,000 from the state, but you have to match it 1-to-1. And it's not available until fiscal year 24. And the applications we do in May. There are other grants through our certified local government program. We've gotten up to $50,000. There's a small category grant. Some of them require matches and them don't. They run on a fiscal year basis, but they're usually a year. You apply for them and you don't get them until a year later. Again, it has to be for a public purpose. The guidelines that Mr. Little mentioned were paid for by CLG money. Our resurvey was paid by special small category grant money from the state. There are other foundations that help support stabilization of buildings, identification of them. The National Trust has a small grant program that I've used a long time ago. The Florida Trust may have a little bit, but the numbers we're talking about in preserving the buildings, I don't know of a public or semi-private funding source that would provide that money unless we matched it and it ended up with a public purpose.
Okay. And what effect would that have on us if we are considered an endangered area? What are the implications of that? If we have this.
It really brings interest and publicity to a challenging historic preservation situation. Many cities are struggling with trying to balance historic preservation with modern needs of infrastructure, additional housing, and there was even discussion a while ago is that parts of the Old Town Historic District really were not similar to the rest of the Old Town Historic District. The real crux of what people really seem to like, as long as I've been around, are what you feel and experience on Lake and Lucerne. The master plans that were done in the 1990s had, the parking that the CRA ended up buying that sort of bifurcates the historic Old Town from the buildings that we're talking about. And so there's a little bit of a question when it comes to integrity and strength of the historic message that's coming across. There are so many holes in the area of the south side of the Old Town District with a parking lot or an open space or a missing building or something new that really isn't appropriate to be there. The whole parking lot on K Street, that was something at some point, but it's a gigantic 350-foot long gap between the Old Town, and 4 buildings. I'm sorry, it's 375 at the other end. And so some of that, I think you can't really appreciate the 10,000 foot level view of it. It would have been great if we could have collectively moved those buildings in one place and built the integrity and strengthened the historic character of part of a district, but that didn't happen. And we aggressively worked with 4 or 5 entities that wanted to move them, but they didn't have a place to take them, or it was excessively expensive to go where they wanted to go. And 2 of them did not want to sign a preservation covenant to preserve them. As an example, the person that wanted the fourplex wanted to jacket up a floor and add parking garages underneath, garage underneath it and change the front. I'm like, well, that doesn't really serve the purpose of preservation. So we didn't really take him seriously. So you've got a myriad of issues that we're not the only city that's confronted with this.
Okay.
Were we designated as a?
We were listed on the list, yes.
We are.
Endangered places and.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, you.
I know. Sorry. Well, I wanted to hear about the grants and this new status that we have.
It only comes out this year. I mean, it's part of Historic Preservation Month, and they try to get publicity for those areas that are, threatened.
Okay. Well, that might help us with RFPs for people that want to come in and work on the structures we did say we wanted to keep. So I just want to address those structures that we said we wanted to keep. So that was my recollection, that we looked at this list and we looked at the costs, and it didn't feel worth the investment, but we identified the structures we wanted to keep. I still don't want to spend city money and bringing all those structures up to a livable condition. We just don't have the money for that. If there was part of a private proposal to do that, that's fine, but I can't sign off on sending city money to pour into those structures. And the last thing that I haven't heard anybody say yet that I'm really worried about is the 5 stories. Like when the 5 stories, having just 5 stories for between Dixie and Federal right on the avenue. I do agree that I'm really excited about the different buildings and the different options we saw for the infill development. I thought that was great. Like you walk down L Street and you see this structure, it looks different than that structure, it looks different than that structure. That preserves the integrity of our downtown and seeing that variety of buildings. But I don't think 5 stories on a downtown avenue creates a very walkable experience. I don't think it is a visitor attraction. And I'm worried about the building in here looks fine. It's cut up in certain ways so that it's not overwhelming. But if we change our rules to allow 5 stories down that whole strip on the avenue, I'm just worried about the effect that that's going to have. I think that would completely change our character.
Okay.
So I'm surprised I haven't heard more about that tonight. I brought this up with the initial report that came back. I was like, I don't know if I can be comfortable with 5 stories. I just think, I know we have the Lucerne there, but I don't know that we want to open up our whole avenue going 5 stories. Like Delray doesn't have 5 stories right on the avenue with all their development.
It's
Right now,
Right now, it's 4 stories and 45 feet. However, if you would like to build facade straight up at that height, it has to be set back at least 18 feet from the front setback line. So it creates a civic space that Mr. Little mentioned. The only way to get to the 5 stories, which now has been said we don't like this avenue, is through a planned development of at least a half an acre, which allows 4 stories to go to 5 stories and a sustainable bonus. And that goes, the max height is 56.25 feet, which is 9 feet shorter than the Lucerne. So that's how it is now. But to get a half an acre, to get to the point where you can build a 5-story, the only way that could happen was with this assemblage of land. There is no other half an acre floating around downtown without tearing down some major piece of what's already downtown that's probably a contributing structure. I mean, the parking lot that Mr. Kislin owns right across from Lucerne next to Cafe Paradiso is close to a half an acre. But that have significant design review. Keep in mind that the Lucerne doesn't meet current setbacks in any shape or fashion. It doesn't meet current code. It doesn't meet building lot coverage. It doesn't meet generally anything. So that can happen.
All right, well, I don't like there's a little bit of a public open space courtyard that really, I don't know what a public person would do there. It looks like just a big entrance into the building. And it's a very tall building. And I'm concerned about that. There are recommendations in here for us to get rid of the sustainability bonus for that strip of area and to open up by right to 5 stories. And so I think before we issue the RFP, we have to, as a board, decide what are the rules that we're going to keep in place or change regarding our downtown. So
by right, what would it be right?
By right means that it can be built with just staff reviewing it.
No, but how many stories by right?
By right now is 2 and 30 feet.
but I agree with the Treasure Coast that if we have very clear rules to developers, this is what we will allow, and you don't have to go through a whole review and process. I think that does help developers come into the area because they know exactly what they can and cannot do. I just don't think 5 stories is the right rule to give to them.
I think that goes to the viability of the financial.
Well, that also goes to the fact that remember, while I've talked about a lot of stuff and we've done a lot of work, our core mission is to take in public input, test them financially, test them physically, what fits, give you some recommendations that would ultimately inform an RFP for that L&M parcel. We're not recommending that you change the code in all of downtown. We were suggesting that, within the historic district, you may come across these issues again. And so you might consider loosening some of the regulations in the historic districts in that historic district relative to parking and maybe density. But really our specific recommendations are for this site. And in fact, we've seen other beautiful proposals that have 4 and 5 stories in that corner. And I think that it could be done very tastefully, and you wouldn't have to worry about that tracking up and down the corridor, the avenue.
Straight up to the bottom.
Yeah, and you can handle that through what the requirements are. But I'm here to listen, so I just wanted to remind us again that we're really looking at just the L&M piece.
Right. So that's my major concern is with the height there. And I would like, between now and while we're writing the RFPs, I would like to see something. Right now it says, we're not going to be able to recover the total cost of the land with this, even with the additional height and everything else. What the private sector can give to us is requires all of this height on Lake Avenue. And we can't recover the cost of the land. I'm not trying to let go.
I tried to turn mine off.
So I would like to understand the finances a little bit better and see, for this part alone, what is the pro forma of that building versus the other 4 buildings that were suggested in here. So I just would like to have a little more understanding of how this is being split up. And those are my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Diaz, you've been very patient.
Thank you. First, I'm going to try my hardest to not cough into the microphone, but no promises. So a lot of what I wanted to talk about has already been covered. So, you all always have good questions. So I want to kind of revisit, or maybe I'll close out with something, Mayor, that you started with, and that's the reminder that what we're seeing in the presentation, the drawings and all that, it's not like these are the blueprints and we're deciding on this, right? It's a really good starting. I think it's a good starting point. I think like many members in the community and the comments and the emails that I've seen, I agree with quite a lot of it. I mean, there's comments on all sides of it. And I think this gives us kind of a good starting point to get a good RFP out. And we're not necessarily committing to like, any really specific design or anything like that. And, taking that into consideration, we've talked a little bit about kind of having that flexibility. And I think I'm really looking forward to the RFP process with CRA and Regional Planning Council, because I think if we have to be really careful and conscious of how we draft this RFP, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, this is a huge project. It's going to last a very long time, whatever we choose with. So I think, a really good comment that stood out to me tonight was Mr. Goodstein said, we have time. This is an important decision and we have time. I probably won't go as far as to say that we have all the time in the world. I think the more that these properties sit empty and unused, it does a huge disservice to our community. And the faster that we get to a good decision, the better we'll be. So I think the way that we do that, and the way that, as we go through this RFP process, working in some of the flexibility, like, some of the key things that really stand out to me is like, the parking, lowering the parking requirement, for example. Well, that's a great recommendation, but I would still want to keep some flexibility to hear what a developer or an applicant might propose in both directions of that, right? Same for like the unit sizes. I think 601 for square footage is pretty good. And I think depending on who the applicant is and the developer, it could even go smaller and be really marketable. So I would be really conscious of drafting this RFP to kind of keep that in mind, and so that when we get proposals, we have a little bit of flexibility and we can cover kind of a range on people for what people have been asking for. We had really good participation in the charrette, which is incredible. And when you have 60 people, it's really hard to get 5 people to agree on everything. When you get 60 people, you're going to have a wide view of vision and planning and thoughts and ideas. And even with those 60 people, it's not going to be all encompassing. So there's probably still something out there that I wouldn't want to keep the blinders on and limit ourselves to potential applicants who might have, ideas out there that maybe we haven't even considered or thought of. So with that, Mr. Waters brought up, I think I heard him bring up the potential of having what we'd call like a points allocation system to determine who's, which applications kind of percolate to the top. I think that's a really good idea. I know it's quite a bear to come up with those categories and what points get what. That can be definitely a chore to come up with, but I think that's a really good unbiased system to get there. Another and somebody else, I think it was Miss Fairfax, mentioned that West Palm Beach property where the IHOP used to be on a C51. West Palm Beach got, I think they had 6 applications for that property, and they had the community vote on them. When those applications came in, of course, the city made sure they were financially viable, all the requirements were met. That is a really novel way of deciding on a project. And I think that is a conversation we should definitely talk about. It obviously doesn't have to be part of this RFP, but That's something that I'm actually have always been a big fan of. And what really got me thinking on this, because I know that property really well. Obviously, it's on the C-51, and I'm very involved in water issues, so that's kind of like front lines of some of our water pollution issues. And Mr. Bartlett really, he really hit the nail on the head with his comment, and he's, Drew, somebody I personally like always look up to him because his work at the Water Management District as the executive director. I know he has really good insight on government process and this sort of thing. And his comments, really got me thinking that I think this might be a good opportunity because of what has happened in the past and how this process has come along. This project might be the good opportunity to kind of explore that kind of option of voting what the top applicants are. And who knows, maybe we won't get that many applications, so it might be a null point to talk about. But it's just something I wanted to put out there and to keep in mind. And I'm, really looking forward to the next steps and working with CRA and William and Regional Planning Council to kind of develop this RFP and really take the next steps to getting this project going. And as also kind of a side note, and also as like a reminder to myself, I would like to have a conversation on, whatever happens and as this process goes along, what can we, if and I know we've talked about this in the past, what can we do if it's available in the meantime? We talked about like the beer garden idea. Every time I walk by that property on K Street, I feel like if we remove that, the Norfolk, if we remove that Norfolk pine, if we level the grass, remove all the invasives, I know there's like loads of mother-in-law tongue, there's a lot of invasive plants on there. I think if we leveled it out, that could be a good temporary, picnic table area for, I don't know, beer garden, food truck, whatever it may be. There's ideas out there that we can talk about. And I think I would be down to have that conversation. So that's it.
Thank you.
Mayor, I want to just interrupt real quickly. I don't think that we should necessarily be wedded to just an RFP process.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of all this. As we move forward to things that are included, we might look at other options of how to solicit information or bidding. There's an RFQ that doesn't have a specific proposal. We look at their declaration of their commitment to what is Lake Worth and show examples of what other work they've done and the caliber of the quality of the people that are involved in their team. And that might come out with a team with no specific proposal. It may not lead to a project. That's not a guarantee, but it might open the door to more negotiations to have something that is more palatable from the beginning. There's the ITN process, which was kind of a failure at the beach. There's a couple other solicitation processes. What I would suggest is that I will get with Valentina when she has a moment, and we'll walk through the various ways we could solicit information and give you the pros and cons of each. And then you could pass on a recommendation to the CRA that we would prefer that this avenue versus another one.
Thank you. Thank you. You have
Excuse me, Mayor.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. I just wanted to let you all know you had reached the half-hour mark for your discussion.
Okay, well, it's special meeting, so it's the only thing we're meeting about, so I don't think we're bound by that half an hour restriction. My thoughts are, I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're finally here. It's no secret that the L&M project was very disturbing the way it was handled. I was very much against how it was handled, but we are here today and we move forward from here. We want the best project for downtown that fits that has a combination of fitting the spirit of our downtown and yet making it a new financially viable place for people to live, for people to come, to draw people to the city and to live here. I hear a lot about parking and minimal parking, and I am against that grain. I love parking. We're not going to tell people to walk downtown where, say that last mile, it's like the last 3 blocks as far as I'm concerned. So that's something that I'm watching. And I think that the K Street, if those houses are going to be demolished, I am not opposed to a parking garage. If we can do a private-public partnership with a parking garage, that might be helpful. Or just extending the parking lot down to First Avenue South. We need the parking. I live downtown. I mean, I live, as you all know, I live on Second Avenue South and L Street, and my office is on L Street and Lake Avenue. So I see it every day how it works. And we have a parking issue downtown. We need some more parking. And so that's one of the things that is my, when I think about the project, that's one of my concerns is the parking. And I think that without, if we consider L&M, without considering the parking, we're doing a disservice for people. One of the other concerns that I have, or things that I think about, which is not included here, of course, is the landscaping. I mean, we want to make it a lush green area for people to walk, to shady area for people to walk through. I think that's an important part of what we're trying to do downtown. I have a particular affection for the green building on the corner of, and I know I've mentioned this to Dana, and we talked about parking as well, but the green building, which was the dentist office, which is now owned by the city, it's now our parking building, but has been our visitor center, I think would be a wonderful place to maintain, to keep there in, either build around it, because that would be, in terms of the downtown, a perfect place for the city to have a visitor center. It's got a little meeting room, it really serves the purpose, and it is historic, and it's in good shape. So that would be, it was Dr. Green's office before the chamber board. I'm old, what can I tell you? It was a dentist office, and, I thought that's one of the things that, we all have little particular things, that's one thing that I would champion, is trying to maintain that building, and Dana says we can't, but I think we can try and find it. Fair enough. So, those are my really specific landscaping, the green building and the parking are my concern. I think that we've had a lot of comments. I think that at this point, I would like to entertain a motion. And then the motion would be, let's talk about what the motion would be. The motion would be, and I'm looking at our attorney. The motion would be to approve going forward with either an RFP or the most appropriate selection process that we can come up with, and to go forward with the recommendations of, again, it's not written in stone, subject to what somebody comes. There are a few ideas, it's an interesting idea, because we would have somebody then that's qualified to do it, that knows how to do it, that has a little more insight. It's just another way to look at it. So I think, and I see your light is on, Mr. McBoyd, but I think we've talked a lot. So I'd like to ask for a motion. I'd like a motion.
Happy to make the motion. Move forward with a process along the lines of what is proposed, looking to think that we make sure that before we agree on all of the recommendations of the sort of planning recommendations, that we have some ability to use. I too have concern about the 5 stories. I love the setback. I love the building. The general feeling, certainly very different, straight wall up. But I do have a concern about 5 stories. So, I think we need to have some mechanism for that. So with that in place, we have an opportunity to look in detail. What are we doing to let's move forward.
Okay, so okay, all right, that's great. Let's just follow that.
And moving forward the process, now I have some caveats I'd like to have clarity on. Does that mean that there is a vote that the demolition permits for those buildings can be issued?
We voted on that in May.
Okay,
Yes,
well,
they're done.
that's included. That's part of the process. And I want to make it clear that, they get issued next week and they go, because there is a very large grant that we're getting ready to lose if we don't use it to demolish the buildings from the Solid Waste Authority. Second, I will, as part of the motion, I would propose that staff, me and Valentina, and probably the legal team, come up with a whole series of parameters that will be appropriate for whatever vehicle we use. And then we can itemize those and you can pick from them. And we might want to set a time frame.
I was going to say, yeah.
That we'd like to have maybe a follow-up meeting. So I work better with deadlines. Maybe we have a follow-up meeting in April that we'll have worked through all of this. We'll have the various options for solicitation, the various pieces, including Dana's recommendations of what would be appropriate to include, like in terms of height and the things I have listed here. And then a time frame there that would then lead to whatever it is that's floated by the CRA.
Can we move that up to to March?
I was going to say this.
April seems very far away.
Well, you already have a lot on your plate coming up the next month.
Just keep serving us.
And if it's going to be in March, it would have to be the latter part of March. Because we do have some staffing constraints in finance. that we have
That's
not
right.
worked through yet. I'm getting ready to kick off the mobility plan. So my time is fair, but so if you would like to have it in March, I would like maybe the same time frame in March as we have now. Maybe it's the fourth Tuesday of the month or the fourth Thursday or something.
I'm fine with modifying the motion to include the timeline. I'm hearing some reluctance to do it in March. I would be fine with April, but I'll leave that to the rest of you. I would thank you for bringing up the demolition part. I think what I'm hearing is that we don't have a lot of options. I would ask that the motion do include that we really make sure that demolition is our last option, that we have.
No,
Look,
no.
No, not
We
vote.
voted to demolish them.
It's done. We did the CRA.
We did not vote.
We gave consensus. The CRA voted. They've already picked it. The plans are in review. We cannot keep backing up the train. We're going forward.
Yeah, really. So
We did vote on, well, we gave consensus on the structures we wanted to keep. However, were other structures that weren't on that list. So I guess I don't know all of the structures that the CRA said they were going to demolish. For example, the Havana Hideaway, I'm not advocating for that. We have to try to save that, but that was not on our list of structures that we looked at, but I do believe it's on the list to be demolished. So there's
That building,
deserve to have some clarification
that building
here.
was condemned long before the ones that were related to Allentown.
Right, so when we say all the structures of the CRA are moving forward with demolition, that we told them to do that is not accurate because we did not get the full list of all those properties. So right now, the one that our mayor talked about, the Chamber of Commerce, that's our property still, right? And that's not slated for the demolition. So that one's safe. I just wanted some clarification.
And the 17 South M and its garage,
Right,
the big white building, and then there's the nicer little cottage that's just north of the fourplex, and the two-story building. Those are the ones that are proposed.
and
to
the
be-
fourplex.
Yeah, the one and the four.
24 South L and 26 South L we're keeping.
Yeah.
30 South L, 32 South L, 25 South K, 704 First Avenue, and 710 First Avenue South are demoed.
And the Havana had
And I don't know.
509 like Avenue.
Yeah, and that one. Those are the ones that are on demo.
A
So
a clarifying question, in the proposals from the Treasure Coast, did any of the proposals include keeping, including by moving, any of the buildings that are on the current demolition list?
no.
No.
This,
Oh, and closer back.
Dana, did you have a comment?
because it seems like if the proposal.
In the interest of time tonight, I jumped to the final recommended plan, but we looked at all options from the charrette on, keeping, the majority of the buildings, moving some of them. But you used the term value engineering, which is, the truth is that they simply didn't pencil out financially. And so, as I said during my presentation, when we got the word from the city that, all but these buildings are going to be demolished, that's been decided upon, we breathed a bit of relief because coincidentally, the buildings that were to remain are the ones that we kept in the final plan.
Right.
So a long answer to your short question is yes. The final version that we are recommending to you, that we see pencils out in different ways financially, keeps the fourplex, keeps the little building to the north of it.
Keep 17,000.
Which one is that? The-
17 South M.
Later services.
Of course, that was never in question.
Right. And I don't think a vote's been taken for Greenville.
No,
You
and
know, I love that building.
I learned that last time we met. Yes.
To buy that building.
I would love to buy that building. Okay, so we have a motion and we're gonna just, we're gonna get it. Concise, let's go to concise. So your motion is to go forward with a process, having staff come back to us with a choice of ways to do that process. And was another one?
By April.
Possibility to review the actual development recommendation, make sure that we are comfortable with applying those.
I don't understand what that means.
The changes to our code, the recommendation.
Exactly.
That would be right.
I think that's separate, but it relates.
I'm missing something here, to follow the recommendations of the Treasure Coast in making those changes to the code. Is that what
I'm
you're
saying
saying?
that we should be really separately, because I don't think we.
Oh, that's not part of your motion, then.
It's to.
Okay, I'll clear help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm old. I'm
Dane
tired.
and I go back a long way, and I'm very supportive of some of the things that are there. I haven't figured out how some of them could be implemented. We will bring back to you how those could be incorporated in our code. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a motion to go, it's like a motion to go forward.
With everything, including
go
demolition.
forward. Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah,
Madam Mayor, if I may, maybe help to clarify that
we would appreciate that.
the motion is for staff to work on a solicitation based on the Treasure Coast Plains recommendations
Okay,
in their report, to do that by staff, and I'm assuming with partnership with CRA staff, to
Yeah.
bring that draft solicitation back to the commission before the end of March for review, so you can review the criteria and the requirements for that.
Sure. I may just correct one thing. We will not have a solicitation written by the end of March. What we will have is the parameters to guide the creation of the solicitation and give you the pros and cons of the various options by the end of March.
sounds good.
And that would include
Demolition.
moving forward with the demolitions, as stated by Commissioner Malega.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have that? It's been a lot of chit chat.
I do, Madam Mayor.
See, I'm done with you people. Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
I did.
Okay, thank you. And you can always talk to our attorney to clarify that.
Yeah.
So we have a motion, we have a second by Commissioner Malega, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Did you vote?
I did.
All right. Okay, but let's, if we have a vote, we have a unanimous
Well,
vote.
anybody from the audience that doesn't want to say can, is free to leave.
No, no, I just want to make sure that our vote is done.
Right.
So we have a
So we
vote,
have a vote. We have the motion to vote.
and we just voted unanimously.
We voted unanimously.
Okay.
My question is, that was about the solicitation process. So to Vice Mayor's point, when are we going to be hearing the recommendations for any changes we actually want to make to our LDRs or code? Is that going to happen at the same meeting as we talked
No,
about?
that's going to be a longer process. However, those, I feel the solicitation could have some of these parameters in it
Okay.
and kind of serve as a,
Guide.
what is it?
A guide.
An exploration of whether they can work or not. Like a guinea pig kind of thing. It'll be, so we include those that, we can make work and have those as parameters in the solicitation. And then, depending on how people interpret it, because we have some other pieces that were adopted since the master plan
Right.
was done that I want to talk to you about as well, because we now have a statement of, basically a statement of understanding of those things that are unique to Lake Worth for projects that are over 7,500 square feet. Well, that might give us a lot of insight as to whether you get it or not. If you can't write and explain why you belong here and how you understand that,
Right.
then maybe you're not the right developer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We didn't have that when the SREP was done, and we didn't.
That's right.
We can always grow corn there.
Let's go on there.
Or what
Make
the
green
semi-permanent retail? That was a really interesting slide.
Oh, listen,
I
I would
thought
love,
that was great.
if we didn't, if it wasn't financial, I would love.
Motion to adjourn?
Say, excuse me, I'm in the middle of. I would love to see like agree, like have that as a fairgrounds for the city. If we didn't need the money, but we.
Maybe there's something we can do while we're between now and when.
Well, okay, motion to adjourn has been said, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Stokes, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everyone.